Hello everybody, I am Ross, the Genie Vlogger, and welcome back to another Professional Genealogist Reacts. On today's video, I will be reacting to Steve Heimler reacting to me. But with all that said, let's just jump into the video.
Now with Steve's video, his reaction, he cuts up the video so you don't see my entire video in that. When we watch Drew's reaction, he watches the entire thing straight through.
Attached as a provisioner in Napoleon's army during the French invasion of Russia.
No.
One of my ancestors was part of Napoleon's army. I've got chills. This is amazing. So professional genealogists looked into my family tree, did a lot of research, and judging by the title of this video, he might have found some things that are surprising. So I want to find out what they are. This is the first time I'm watching it. You're going to watch it with me.
When Steve Heimler of Heimler's History signed up to be on my YouTuber Family Tree series, he only knew a little bit about his family history, which basically amounted to the fact that they had lived in Michigan for generations and had some Irish ancestry. So we were quite surprised when Steve took an Ancestry DNA test.
I gotta say, the DNA test was kind of weird. Like, just fill up a little vial with spit, put it in a box, and then put it in your mailbox. It was weird. Anyway.
And had a significant amount of unexpected DNA. Where did it come from? After discovering this, my main goal was to identify Steve's ancestors connected to this surprise DNA and then uncover their story. And what I uncovered was quite amazing.
Oh my gosh. Okay. This is, I'm getting a little sweaty right now.
Hello everybody, I am Ross, the Genie Vlogger, and on today's video, I will be discussing the story of Steve Heimler's Jewish ancestry.
Jewish?
He gave me the little bit of information he knew, and it was enough to get things started. But I also suggested doing a DNA test.
That is not how it's done.
Now, he said that in this video, and I was kind of laughing because for those who know, there are two tests that do the mouth swab, kind of like what's in the video. We can go back far enough. Oh, there we go. So like the mouth swab, like here, but then that's Family Tree DNA MyHeritage. But if you test through Ancestry 23andMe, then you have to do the spit vial thing, which is what Steve did.
That is not how it's done. I spit into a little plastic. That would have been nice.
While we waited for the results, I built out the tree from what Steve gave me and was quickly able to build out to his great-grandparents and then start focusing on different lines. Both sides of his family seemed to have deep lines in Michigan, just as Steve had told me. I also noticed his line tracing to Irish ancestry and a few lines back to early Ontario and Quebec.
Sorry.
Then we got Steve's DNA results, and something really stood out. Steve had 12% Jewish ancestry. Now, 12% is quite significant because it's equivalent to a great-grandparent. And I had all of his great-grandparents identified, so it was likely one of them had Jewish ancestry. Now I had to figure out which one. At this point in researching Steve's family tree, I had only worked on half the lines in depth, but I could easily rule those out. One great-grandparent had German Catholic roots, another great-grandparent had Dutch roots, and two great-grandparents had Irish roots.
I've got chills right now. I've got chills. This is amazing. German Catholic, Dutch, and we're looking for a Jewish.
And I'm going to actually have more episodes on his family tree, going into the different branches that I talk about in this section.
Ancestor. What? Wow. Okay.
So that left four great-grandparents who might be Jewish. So I started with the great-grandparents on his paternal side. Arthur Stephen Wozniak was born in 1917 to Frank Wozniak and Helena Sigilska. I quickly found that Frank and Helena were all buried at St. Joseph Cemetery in South Bend, Indiana.
They got the tombstones. How does this guy do it? How does he do it? That's amazing.
The family plot and other records seem to indicate that they were Polish and Catholic. There were a few relatives who were DNA matches to Steve who were related through Frank's siblings, and a few through Helena's siblings, which allowed me to correlate whether or not there was Jewish ancestry here. There were no confirmed DNA matches that I could find through this side of the family, so I wasn't able to correlate whether or not there was Jewish readings in the DNA, but it seemed very unlikely that this part of the family was Jewish. So then I turned to the parents of Steve's maternal grandfather, Sheldon Robert Franks. Loretta's parents were William Koch and Pauline Nemitz.
He's a good storyteller.
Their obituaries seem to indicate the family was
That comment made so much to me because his video was the second one I had done in this style. The first one was by Cynical Historian. So remember what we just watched with Mr. Beat, very different, much more tutorial like. And this one, I think I tweaked a few things. I think I added a bit more on the music. I think I'd learned a bit more about pacing and stuff. And so when you said, you know, he's a good storyteller, I was like, oh my God, that's exactly what I'm trying to go for. I want this to be a story that's just a really interesting one. So that meant so much.
Part of the evangelical and reformed church, so they seemed unlikely to have Jewish ancestry. Luckily, there were some really close relatives from this side through Loretta's siblings, and none of them showed any Jewish readings, ruling out Loretta and leaving one possibility: Steve's great-grandfather, Louis Bernard Franks. And if we couldn't find any Jewish ancestry here, that meant that we either had an NPE or not parent expected somewhere in the tree.
Wait, did he just say not parent expected? I might have a different parent than I thought.
Yeah, that was a little, when he reacted like that, I was like, oh wait, yeah, that's why we don't always say not parent expected. It's I forgot, there's a few variations of it, but basically it just means, you know, unknown ancestor, or the ancestor you were expecting isn't the ancestor you actually have.
I'm not sure I want to continue with this.
So I turned to the main sources I'd been using in this research: death records and obituaries. I quickly found Lewis's obituary, and there it stated that Lewis's funeral was officiated by a rabbi. And so it seemed we'd found our likely Jewish ancestor. Lewis was born in Michigan in 1904 to Sidney Frank and Jenny Rich. Lewis was the youngest of his siblings, and a look at the 1910 census shows he was the only one of his siblings to be born in the US. Lewis worked most of his life in the factories around Detroit, having seemed to start in auto factories but then moving on to paper factories. Lewis's World War II draft record from 1940 showed that he was working for the Hind and Dausch Paper Company, which had opened a factory in Detroit just a year prior in 1939. Hind and Dausch Paper Company was founded in 1888 in Ohio and specialized in making corrugated boxes.
So I actually found this footage for Hind and Dausch through the Library of Congress website, which is actually a really great place to do research. For anyone who doesn't know, loc.gov, amazing. Yeah, and they had this like entire Hind and Dausch video, because all I did, I went there and I searched Hind and Dausch, and there it was. They had a lot of stuff there, which is why I could really uncover a lot with that story. But with this footage, there was a lot of footage. It wasn't the actual plant that his ancestor was at in Detroit. It was one of their other plants, I think, that was in this video. But, you know, basically same time, same equipment, you know, all that sort of stuff. But it was really long. And so I actually sped up the video a lot so I could include multiple scenes, because I just thought it was really cool to have that view of like, what did it look like? Granted, it's going a lot faster than it actually went.
The company had opened factories all over the country and became world known for their products, but the employees were not happy with their working conditions. On July 17th, 1946, the workers at the Detroit Hind and Dausch plant went on strike for 13 weeks, one of 7 factories across the country who had done so that year.
So I got some labor union striking in my blood. Okay, I like it. I like it a lot.
Now, I still didn't have a good idea of the family history, so I started to look into Lewis's parents, Sidney and Jenny. Sidney and Jenny had arrived in America around 1903. Sidney worked for himself as a liquor merchant in Detroit, selling liquor and wine. But things would take a turn for the family on November 8th, 1916, when Michigan would amend its constitution to prohibit the manufacture, sale, and transportation of alcohol.
Wow. So these people were in the liquor business. They're absolutely destroyed by prohibition. Now, okay, now what I want to know is, did they get into bootlegging? Do I have bootlegging blood? Oh!
It's
See, the funny truth about it is, if they did any bootlegging, it's doubtful we'd find record of it unless they got arrested.
unknown exactly how.
So if they did it really well and they never got arrested. But yeah, I didn't see anything that hinted at it. And I mean, the other possibility is if they did it and then a descendant or someone actually talked about it later on. But I certainly didn't find anything. That would have been cool.
This time was for the family but they seem to pivot quite well to a wholesale grocery business.
They went to groceries. I thought, you know what? I honor my ancestors. That's fine. Just, I wanted a bootlegger.
Sidney's death certificate also gave another interesting piece of information. His parents, Herschel Frank and Mary Cohen, and their origin in Lithuania.
Lithuania? All I've ever known about my family history is that we are Irish. And then Heimler sounds really German. So assuming that there was German in there as well. Lithuania? Interesting.
After finding a few other records showing other family members also listing Mariampol, I turned to Jewish Gen to learn more. Utilizing a lot of the Litvox-Sig databases, I was able to build out a fairly extensive family tree and actually find out a good bit of information on the family. Sidney's father, Hirsch, was also known as Hirsch Naftali Frank.
Gosh, this is unexpectedly moving me. Something about feeling more rooted in this world, knowing where I came from. I was expecting to do kind of like a funny reacts video, but man.
In 1812, just a little over a year after the birth of his son Niesel, Haywish likely saw Napoleon's army as they retreated through the town of Mariampol, possibly even witnessing Napoleon himself. Family lore from multiple cousins of Steed's from different sides of the Frank family indicated that Haywish may have been French and was actually part of Napoleon's army.
No way. One of my ancestors was part of Napoleon's army, attached as a provisioner to Napoleon's army during the French invasion of Russia. Wow, dude.
This story of Haywish being a Napoleonic soldier certainly could be true, but I honestly think at best it may only be partially true based on the records I saw.
Yeah, part of the reason why I thought that was because a lot of the records indicated the family had been there before Napoleon had arrived, with the story being that, Haywish was coming with Napoleon and then settled in Mariampol. But if that was the case, then it would have meant that, he likely wouldn't have had any kids there unless he had somehow been in that town before the invasion, or he somehow had his kids with him during the invasion or very recently, was able to get them to come really recently after the invasion. And then, but I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, I found multiple births of children of his in the town pre-Napoleonic War, pre-Napoleon's invasion. So I think that was the main reason why I thought, this doesn't really add up. And that's why my thought was, if it was true, it was not going to be true in the sense that he was French and came from France with the invasion. It'd be more of somehow he was, when they came to or through his town, they somehow got him to be a part of, helping in some way. And then it just kind of, telephone of history through time, the story gets grander and grander with each generation, trying to make their ancestors sound way cooler than they were, which I'm sure a lot of us who do a lot of research have run into, where we hear these grandiose stories and then we go and do the research and we find out that there's some basis and truth to it, but a lot of the grandiosity of it is not true.
Oh, Jared, you're breaking my heart. Oh, I'll take partially true. I'll take it.
It's unlikely any descendants of the Frank family still live in Mariampol. Many left starting in the 1880s, and those that stayed were almost all murdered during the Holocaust. A look at Yad Vashem record shows 9 people with the surname Frank from the town of Mariampol listed as murdered, although little information was given about them.
Wow. So, possible relatives of mine were killed in the Holocaust. Like, those are connections I would never in a million years have thought that would be true of my ancestry.
It is likely most of them were killed on September 1st, 1941, when over 5,000 people from Mariampol were murdered by the Eisenstaats's commando troops under Karl Jaeger. All but 100 of those murdered that day were Jewish. The town is listed amongst the famous Jaeger report, a detailed report by Karl Jaeger showing the number of people murdered by his troops from July to November of 1941. The Germans had entered Mariampol in July of 1941 and had already murdered a few hundred people in town throughout July of 1941 before their mass execution of the townspeople on September 1st. One cousin of Steve's, who I actually got in touch with, ended up sending me a family tree that had been created in 1960. This tree traced the family back to Haywish Frank and correlated with pretty much everything that I had found using the paper trail.
One really cool thing about this family tree is the cousin of Steve's who sent it to me was an actor in Home Alone and Home Alone 2. He played one of the family members. So that was really cool. He was I don't remember the name of the character, and I don't know if I should necessarily say his actual name in the video or anything. But yeah, his cousin who supplied this tree to me was on Home Alone and Home Alone 2, and he was one of the kids in the family.
Right.
Yeah,
This old tree even mentioned Haywish being a Napoleonic soldier.
Wow, this is crazy. His research, what he just did, based on that little scrap that I gave him, it's like, I think they were born in Michigan or whatever. Like, and he built this whole thing out. He created this entire story, and that was confirmed by a family tree that was created by somebody in my family. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. I don't even know what to say. This is amazing. So, summing up, I've got Jewish ancestry, the heroes of the Napoleonic invasion of Russia. There might be a little bit of a gloss, but that's what I'm going with. And a variety of religious backgrounds all coursing through these veins right here. Amazing.
So yeah, that I love that reaction. The one thing it was actually kind of funny, was I was like, there's some parts that I was like, oh, I wish I'd seen him react to that. Because one of the things that I remember that I thought was so cool that I found was during the mid 1800s, during the Polish rebellions, that I'd found a connection of Franks from his Mariampol, the town of Mariampol, where his family was, with the name Frank, who were like hung in the forest by the Polish resistance fighters.
Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this reaction, be sure to click right here to see another. Thank you to my Patreon patrons and YouTube members.